All right, friends. So what are we talking about today? We're talking about fundraising during a pandemic. And I would like to introduce our first guest, Cathi from Speakeasy. Speakeasy was in the middle of fundraising season and did a great pivot and some really interesting programming. So I would love to turn it over to Cathi. Hi, Cathi.
Hi.
And have you tell us a little bit about what you all did. Thanks, guys.
Sure. Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah? Okay, great. So so we had our spring gala scheduled for April 3rd, and we decided to cancel, I think it was on the 12th or 13th, right when the governor gave us the 250 limit for events. The good news for us was that we had 60% of our funding for the gala already committed. So we had almost achieved our sponsorship goal. We were just a couple $1,000s away, and we'd sold about 2/3 of our ticket goal. So we raised quite a bit of money in the room usually. We had a $70K goal for a paddle raise and a silent auction. So that was the money that I was concerned about because we had made most of it. We decided not to postpone for a couple of different reasons. I think just the uncertainty about what was happening next. It's hard to imagine that was just 3 or 4 weeks ago, all that we've learned in the last 3 or 4 weeks, but I was just really nervous about the idea of postponing to June. Our fiscal year ends in June, so the idea of carrying this over into another season and how we carry our sponsors over and cannibalize next year's fundraising, I wanted to take our losses in this season, whatever they were going to be. And I didn't want to cannibalize our end of year programming. The good news for us was because of the governor's stipulation, we were able to get out of our hotel contract, almost all of it. So saving the expenses was what made me confident moving forward and doing the best that we could online. So my first priority in that pivot was to save the sponsorship money and tickets that I already had committed. So we wrote a very thoughtful email and communicated with people very personally, and we didn't get one request for a refund for tickets or sponsorships. So that was huge. So then we had to figure out how we're going to recoup what would have been donated in the room that night. And usually we have two things that happen: a silent auction that we start a week ahead of time and then finish at the gala, and a paddle raise. And the paddle raise is always very carefully crafted after a emotional video and some testimonials, and then we get people to raise their hands. So the silent auction, I wasn't too concerned about because I knew that while we might not achieve our high goal, I knew that it would happen. I knew we would it would work because we'd done it before. But the paddle raise, what I did was I found matching funding for the paddle raise. So usually a number, of our board members will pre-pledge for the paddle raise. So I know I have like a $5,000 pledge. I know I have a $2,500. I know I have $1,000 for hands going up in the room. So I asked our board to offer those pledges, as a match. So so then we spent time kind of figuring out how could we maximize this. So our biggest challenge was thinking about, over the course of the week where the silent auction was going on, how do we communicate with people, motivate them and inspire them on top of all the emails going out about COVID-19, about canceling programming and all of those kinds of things. So we really wanted to be as much about the art as possible. And so we were supposed to have the cast of Choir Boy, which was our first season of the fall, which was an incredible cast of young men who sang spirituals. They were the performers for our gala. So we're like, well, how can we feature them? And we had one of those, what do we even call them now? Virtual performances with, 8 or 10 people on the screen singing the harmony. And we crafted a series of emails over 8 days. And we talked a lot about how much is too much in 8 days. So we did 4, everybody got 3 or 4 messages from us, which we were worried was a lot. I watched the opt-out rates, and they weren't any more than the usual opt-out rates for emails. So for each email to our 20,000 plus, sort of what we call our e-blast list, we had something that included art. So the first thing was a video of Paul Dano talking about the season and the whole thing. I don't know, maybe that's not art, but that's human and its connection. The second thing we did was we had a choir boy performance, a virtual performance that went really well. Yeah, Don liked that one. And then the third thing we did was this, usually in the room, we have like a mission video where we kind of, I had already started working on this. I had interviews from 8 or 10 different people, including our award recipients. And I had, we were already crafting this. So instead of a 6-minute video, we cut it down to just under 3 because we knew online people didn't have the tolerance for that. And then the other thing we did, which was a really creative idea from one of our staff members, is we talked about this idea of, in the room at night, everybody drinks a lot. It's an open bar, open beer and wine. And so as the night goes on and we do the paddle raise at the end and we close the auction at the end, depending on how much fun they're having and how many glasses of wine they've had, we get pledges that we might not have gotten another time. So we were thinking about, well, how are we going to simulate that? And I'll say more about this in a couple minutes, but if I were to do this again, I would have some kind of live stream event where we have live art and a live paddle raise, but we just couldn't figure out how to pull that off. Technically, we didn't have the capability at our fingertips. We would have had to develop that, and I just didn't feel like we had enough time to do everything that well. Knowing what I know now, 4 weeks into this, I think I would have tried to do it, and if I ever had to do this again, I would do something like that. But anyway, one of our staff members came up with this idea of we called the gala the home style gala. So instead of just saying virtual gala or online gala, we wanted people to feel like, okay, I'm going to stay home, drink my glass of wine, peruse the auction, and make a donation. So each one of our staff members dressed in our gala outfit, and we took some creative, fun home pictures. I'm a musician, so I took a picture with a glass of wine at my piano. One of our staff members is really into gardening and plants. She took a picture of her in her gala gown, like watering her plants. And so, I don't know, it was kind of silly, but it felt kind of fun. And we got a lot of engagement out of that. And I also think in retrospect, it was a way to introduce our staff to the community, because we don't usually do that. People meet people, oh, thank you, Graham. So anyway, so we did that, and that was great. So each one of our emails had something creative and fun. We had social media posts every day featuring auction items. And so the other thing that for me was really important was I really spent a lot of time as the director of development. I spent a lot of time like combing my lists and being very targeted and personable. For like the entire week of the gala, I emailed people individually. Oh, did you see this video? Oh, I know you loved Choir Boy. Would you like to see this? Oh, did I tell you we're raising money for the gala? Like I kind of just did everything personal that I can, and it was very individual. I also got our board working for us. So I made sure that both of our boards and all of our sponsors, like I shot them emails twice during the week saying, this is the new thing we posted. Here's a link. Please tell your friends. I was trying to encourage our board members to think about those 2 or 4 or 6 or 8 guests that they would have had at the event to get their friends to make a gift. So what was the result? Our goal for in the room was 74K, and we actually brought in 60. Yeah, which was amazing. So, we didn't quite get to our silent auction goal, but I think we did better than I ever thought we could have. And I think one of the reasons is we didn't have as much stuff as we usually do, because usually in the last 3 weeks before our auction, all those great theater tickets come in and all the big stuff comes in. and we didn't get that because people were canceling events. And then the paddle raise, you know, having that match, I had a lot of people. Well, I keep calling it a paddle raise, but it was just an online donation campaign. That's just the way I budgeted for it. But first of all, more than 50% of that came in on the last day. So I was kind of panicked all week that like, okay, what other gifts have we received that I can grab to call it a match and call it a win? You know, I was kind of panicked, but that last day we emphasized it. We put it out on social media. We sent that mission video, and we exceeded that goal. So we brought in 22K. And that's what came in online over the week. We did get some more gifts in the mail after that as well. So, you know, so that was the result. It was really good. I would say a couple things that I learned. It's really important to get people working for you. So you can't just email and like sit back and then say, okay, let's see what happens. Like I really did push the board to send emails on our behalf, and I made it easy for them by giving them links for the art pieces that I was talking about, the mission video, the pictures, to share those things. The other thing that we did during the week, so we sent these 3 e-blasts, and then I did a 4th set of emails that was very targeted. It wasn't the 21,000 campaign. I looked right in my donor database, who gave to the gala last year, you know, and reminded them of what they gave and would they be willing to give again. And people that I know are close to us, donors, and say, could you support the gala? People who were connected to our award recipients. We were very personal. So I think you have to do that. You have to take the time to do that. The other thing, the one thing that I learned for the future, if I ever did a virtual event, for our gala next year, which I'm assuming is going to happen live, I would consider live streaming my event now. I used to always think of a gala as being just in the room, and like you try to get everybody there, donations in advance, and then you're in the room and you just fundraise from those people. Now that we're also comfortable with these sort of live events and virtual fundraising, I think next year we will live stream a portion of our gala, like the last 1 or 2 phone songs, the testimonials, the video, the paddle raise, and try to get people to commit online from outside the room as well as inside the room. I would never have done that before. So I think that's something that I'll try next year. If you were planning a virtual gala, I would say, like I said, a couple things: get people working for you. Think really carefully about segmenting and targeting different messages to different people. Like put in that time. I think it's really effective. Make sure your content is very much about the art. Anything that you can do that's natural to your company. I think you've got to share art to get engagement. And then I would consider a live streaming event. If I had a gala planned for months from now already, and I was trying to figure out how to do it, I would be thinking about, is there a way I can live stream an event, and how can I get people to commit to watching it? One of the reasons we didn't do it too, with only a couple of weeks to plan it, was we were like, well, people do this. We don't even know. Now, a few weeks into all of us staying at home and seeing what's happening, I think people would tune in. So I think I would do that again. Did I do what you wanted me to do, Dawn? I tried to talk fast so I didn't take up too much time.
You did.
I have to tell you, it's very weird looking at all of your faces and knowing that you're all muted, and I see some of you smile, and like, no, I don't hear anything. I don't hear like a yes or a slap. Or I see, oh, Puppet Showplace Theater is waving at me. That's awesome. So anyway, I hope that was helpful. You know, I am bummed. One of the things I'm really bummed about is the lost cultivation opportunities. I mean, I always come out of our gala with 5 or 6 major donor prospects that I want to cultivate. The other thing that really makes me sad, and I know we're all mourning various things that we've lost, but you know, we had awesome honorees, Front Porch Arts Collective, and Keith McDonald, a longtime donor and board member, and his family was coming from all over the country to our gala. And I'm really sad about not getting to celebrate him. And honestly, I think I would have blown away our goals. I think we would have really exceeded our goals given the fact that we had already achieved our sponsorship goal virtually. Essentially like 3 or 4 weeks in advance. So, I'm bummed about that, but I'll get over it. So one of the things I have to figure out is, how do I honor our honorees? Do I just move them to next spring and think that all of their guests are going to get sponsor again? Like, that doesn't feel right to me. Do we try to do something in June that we don't ask for money again, but we just honor them? Is that enough for them? Do we tack it on to some kind of event in the fall and try to create something with all this uncertainty? I don't know. That I haven't figured out yet. So that's my scoop.
That was fantastic. I have a question for you. I mean, it's kind of rudimentary, but just curious, like, how much of your media was done ahead of time? So videos, e-blasts, all of that. And then how much were you sort of culling together in the midst of the pandemic? What was that workload like?
So I had already done, the second week of March when we were canceling, I already had done a lot of the interviews. And if you want, after this, I can share all the content with you, Dawn, and you can send it to everybody. But I had done all the interview work because we were going to do a video live at the gala. I think, though, if I hadn't, I probably still could have put something together, because you'll see when I show you the video that, a lot of it was stills and people talking. So we could have probably done that. The choir boy thing we pulled together in 3 days, and the home style gala looks, it was just like both of those things were, and Paul's interview, those were things that we just kind of put together in the moment because, I don't know, we had to, right? So we just figured it out. So most of it was done after. It's kind of all I did for a few weeks.
Okay. So just looking through the chat, CST is doing this now with a rollout next week and generating new material all week. Maggie, I might come back to you in a little bit to talk a little more about that, if you don't mind. I'd love to move on to Harold now at the Theater Offensive to talk a little bit about how they pivoted on their gala, but also a lot of the fundraising that they do program by program and how they're looking at that going into the future. Harold, welcome.
Thanks, Don, and the rest of the StageSource family, and I think for you all for being here. My name is Harold Steward. If you don't know me, pronouns they, he, and I have the honor of being producing co-executive director at the Theater Offensive. Just a little bit about the Theater Offensive, if you don't know, or if you're not familiar, or just need an update. Queer and trans organization for over 30 years here in Boston. Queer and trans people of color organization for about a year now by mission and a new strategic plan. And so we definitely have a core base based on identity, and it gets a little bit more complex. Those are kind of umbrella kind of identities, but it allows us to have a sense of focus in terms of our mission and our constituents and the core of the organization. So saying that, we had a couple of things going on, like many of you, during this moment of COVID-19 and arts and decision-making. Actually, on the Tuesday that the governor declared a state of emergency, our fundraiser for our Creative Youth Development Program, True Colors, was that Thursday. So literally we were in the office, the development team, and I was all over the place anyway. And I think having someone who is monitoring it for you, so I'm in the ED role, so it's like I, really don't have the luxury of focusing just on one thing, which is, it serves the job in one way, but it also creates some barriers to even knowing what's going on in every aspect of the organization. And so I walked into a meeting where they announced to me that the governor was about to make an address and we need to sit down, and watched it. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess this is agenda item. And in true Governor Baker form, that address didn't happen at the time that it said it was going to happen. And so we were in the midst of like, okay, can we talk about one thing? And then if someone monitors the computer, we'll stop and kind of go. But, we were just kind of hurrying up and waiting for what the announcement would be. And when it was a state of emergency, this meeting where it was going to be the final kind of team meeting before the gala, before be on the stage, which is more of a corporate fundraiser for our youth arts program. So it's like a 2.5-hour happy hour after work. Come, see, support, go home, is the idea. So that meeting shifted and we became what I said, it looks like we're a emergency response team or something like that. Like now, it was just like shifted. And it was easy for us to make we made the decision quickly, I should say, because it wasn't an easy decision. None of it has been easy. And that is because one of our honorees was in the kind of age demographic that was being communicated at risk. So it was like, oh, wait a minute. So it was like, okay, we don't really need to think anymore about it. Now we need to think about communication and, things like that. In hindsight, what we've also learned is that how do we take information being given about like what is an at-risk population and the ways, and then look at our organization, because even our honorees' age was one consideration, but being an organization that works in the way that we do with the people that we do, there are a lot of health things that we should have also just said, oh yeah, wait a minute, we're going to put a lot of people in risk, even based on the information that we know. So what else was lost, and I'll get back to beyond the stage, but I think at the time we were in rehearsals and a lot of programs are happening at various different processes. And as the days kind of came, we don't own our own venue. So we were reaching out, trying to make the decision based on what BCA or Hibernian Hall, the places that we were contracted to do some of this work, was deciding. And again, the state of emergency was the first thing. The stuff about gathering kind of came later. So it was an iterative process. We were able to cancel all kind of public programs because it was becoming clear that's where we were going, and take the financial hit for it because we only budget $1,000 in ticket sales. So most of our programs are pay what makes you happy, if anything. And that's something that we're very proud of, that, we've been able to organize the organization in such a way. How we do that, and I say now, fundraising is a program of the Theater Offensive because we do so many of them. So it's like, this is our other program called fundraising. So the special event, so Beyond the Stage, and we postponed it, one, because it's the only one that's dedicated to True Colors. So it really is like just cancel it and saying, it's also True Colors 25th anniversary and the announcement of the national tour that they're about to do. So it's like, we still think that's relevant to know and to celebrate. And so now we're looking at fall, but again, it's kind of a day by day, we're watching things. The other fundraiser we had to cancel during this season, we do a fundraiser connected to the Boston Marathon called Sissy That Run. So we solicit LGBTQ runners or allied runners to run in the marathon. We try to help advocate for bibs and apply for bibs. And then they do independent fundraising on their own for the organization. And we supplement that on the marathon day. Our office is right by the finish line. So we've had runners in the marathon, I think, for the last 5 years. And we would just have a little reception in our office, just thanking them and invite our community to kind of celebrate them. And then last year, we moved it to Club Cafe because we wanted to make it more of a community thing, just thinking about there are people who come from all over the world, and there may be LGBTQ people or people who want to be celebrating with us. So we throw the party 50 That Run at Club Cafe and market it to people. And it's also additional kind of fundraising. You can make donations, and Club Cafe is one. So we had to cancel that. And then we don't do a gala. We think we're too queer for a gala. Not too cool, too queer. And our gala also was in competition with like the men's events, the women events. So there was LGBTQ centered galas during the time that we normally would have it. And so years ago, other people dreamed up this idea called Climax. And if you've ever been to Climax, you know it is a big, 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 big party. And we do raise money. But in the last couple of years, I described Climax when I've only been with the organization almost 3 years, and I came to see Climax before I accepted the job. And I don't think my mouth closed during the whole event. Because it happened typically right after the Met Gala, I was started to say, oh, it's kind of like the Met Gala, just with a lot less fabric, so, if any. So it is a celebration of queer culture, the organization, performance. It is sex positive, it is body positive. So how do you have that all in a night? There had been a critique recently that people wanted more party and less fundraising. So this whole year was about, okay, we're not a party promoter, or we don't just throw parties, we still have to raise the money. So how do we achieve that? And so what we were planning this year just was a total rebrand, because, you know, there are a lot of people who enjoy Climax. There are a lot of people who think there are a lot of opportunities with Climax, and it's, you know, kind of dated. But we were planning this Pride party every June, because it is the end of our fiscal year. We do the end of the fiscal year appeal, but also because we are a queer and trans organization, we can use Pride and make it a Pride appeal. So during June, we say, show your TTO Pride during the month of Pride, because, you know, most people nationally and internationally are thinking about LGBTQ people. So we try to maximize that opportunity. And so we were planning on moving Climax to a like the lunch party for Show Your TTO Pride. So happening just a week or two before, so we were not competing with Pride events, but was connected to kind of Pride programming and messaging and things like that. We could focus more on, you know, definitely when you hear the words Pride, people think about a party. So they knew we would be uplifting the party aspect, but you had, you know, over 30 days to kind of support either that night or things like that. So that's also, you know, had to be canceled. And what we have done is we realized that through all of those efforts, we were losing about $200K in our fundraising goal. And I think I would say, you know, if you're fundraising people, you know, your fundraising goal is different than your budgeted one. So our budgeted goal, you know, just for the safety and dealing with all the unknowns, was a little bit lower than what we had said we wanted to achieve with each one of these fundraisers. And in our messaging, you know, it was like, well, do we talk about what we need for the budget or what we need toward these fundraiser goals? And it said, you know, well, we're still launching a major fundraiser, so let's try to get our fundraising goal. And that fundraising goal would be about $200K through all of those efforts. And what we decided to do, we've been in a process of looking at risk capital. So that was introduced to our organization about 2 years ago through another initiative. And we really needed to be, recovery capital. We needed to be in a recovery capital moment. So it was about these fundraisers, but it was also about other potential loss and things like that. So did we have one major opportunity to do recovery capital good? And so what it looks like now is like, what is our messaging? What is the time frame? And what are the different components? And so we moved our Show Your TTO Pride appeal up until, I think we just launched it about 2 weeks ago, and made it a appeal called the Fierce Urgency of Now. So looking at the words of Dr. King, but also we look at the work of Adrienne Maree Brown and Emergent Strategies as a queer woman of color, and how do we have this messaging around this is our fierce urgency and what this moment means. We also had to look at our mission and our history, and the theater offensive was born out of a world health crisis. Like literally, it was in opposition to HIV and AIDS. So how did we communicate that really we were born in and for this moment, and were mission focused and really critical in being in partnership of how to navigate the moment. Like we know how to do art out of a world crisis. So that was beautiful to be able to engage our history and our programming. We communicated what was at risk in this moment and what our objectives were because of COVID-19. So the fundraiser, the Fifth Urgency of Now, had three major objectives, or fundraising objectives. And that was to be able to pay the artists we had already contracted with, whether they had completed all of the work or not, just honoring the process that, you know, the moment you get the gig, you start thinking about stuff, right? And that's, you know, how do we, you know, they put in work, as well as support our youth and create an emergency kind of response fund. We wanted to also keep our fundraising momentum going. So if you've been following the TTO story, thank you. If you haven't, shame on you. No, get engaged. You may know that there's been a lot of organizational change in the last 2 years and growth, including the announcement of us building a building in the Fenway area and managing a space for LGBTQ organizations. So how do we keep that momentum going up and talking about, you know, we are still kind of focused. The different components of this recovery effort was, you know, the e-appeals. We sent out snail mail to about 200 folks. A major donor at the theater offensive is $500 and above. So we had a very targeted snail mail. Last Friday, I was in there signing all 200 letters in the rain and took them to the mailbox, like personalizing all 200, which is kind of a small sampling. But they got out there, the snail mail. And then we have, through Network for Good, the ability to create personal fundraising pages. So the organization has been trying to grow in the area of peer-to-peer fundraising. Through our campaign, you can create your own page with the same branding and messaging. Network for Good, it even gives us email templates and things like that. And that is to activate other people like our board, our staff, and community who want to fundraise on our behalf. So I have a goal now, a page that says, I want to raise $500. I can create my own messaging with the same branding, or I can, you know, use the messaging the organization already has. But that means Harold now is a personal fundraiser during this moment. And so our board and some of our staff are following that. Create your own page. It's almost like the Facebook kind of birthday. I want to support this organization. So those, and then the other thing is our portfolio work. So this gave us an opportunity to appeal to our institutional donors and major donors in a different way. So either you do this as an ED or another staff person, or you encourage your ED to do all the kind of personal communication work. So it just means now I have a portfolio of people that I'm talking to daily in the same way that I would talk to. This is organizational updates. Oh, how are your children? I saw that this happened. And then I go in with, you know, this is where we are. And the things that everybody wants to know what's going on with the theater festival in this moment. So they want that kind of information. They want to be engaged and they want to know what they can support. So I'm matching our major donors with what I know they like. True Colors is doing this. This is how we're reworking this. This is the radical organizing work. Here's the process. Here's the messy stuff that we're doing. On the institutional side, because we, you know, had already planned to reach out to most of the foundations, we kind of just met in the middle and we're able to give them organizational updates. And they already have a number that they can, you know, it's one strategy, one kind of goal, but a lot of the recovery capital. So then they have been able to say what they can do on the foundation side, whether it's releasing more money, releasing the restrictions on the money, or, and I should also say, because we have reserves, we were kind of okay. We didn't have to fire anybody for the moment. So this was about, or I should say fire. Well, I mean, that's one aspect. We didn't have to make any kind of decisions in the moment. So this was about longer term investment. So even with some of those conversations with donors, especially the institutional donors who couldn't do anything right now, instead of saying, okay, we can release restrictions, it was about, you know, how to think about us in the future and what we would need to do towards anything, whether it was the building, our programs, keeping staff, or reworking, you know, we were able to really talk about our value to the arts ecology here in Boston as a queer and trans people of color organization working in the way that we do. So, it was like, oh, we were not lumped into similar ways of being. And I think I even say that if you do same kind of structures, really, how are you different in this moment? And really adding to the arts ecology is a part of the narrative that says, Boston would want to continue to have a strong arts ecology. Let's look at the similarities and the difference to make sure we're taking care of all of it. And so the only other thing that I would say is that we couldn't go to virtual just because people want to be in the room partying. So I haven't engaged with like online parties yet. The one in the room is a lot to manage, and I'm just like, managing the virtual world is not necessarily what I signed up to do just yet. So there's a lot more before I'm like, we're going to party online. So yeah, that's our story.
Great. We have some questions in the chat, and I'm going to raise them up. There's one question for Harold. How many fundraisers did TTO have in play when the pandemic hit? Who at TTO was involved in the messaging conversation?
So we had the other stage that was going to happen that week, the marathon fundraiser that would happen on Boston Marathon, and then the pre-prize. So 3 at different kind of scales were planned, and it was our special event fundraiser for the year. We were supposed to have one in the fall that got canceled for some reason, or maybe yes, because we were having other institutional shifts during the fall, so we moved them all in the same period. So yeah. And the other part of the question?
The other question, who at TTO was involved in the messaging conversation?
So we have our development and communication department is one and the same. So we talk about messaging and fundraising all the time, like it's the same conversation. And so really, I think that was also beautiful. I should say on staff, we have me who oversees the development department, a development coordinator, and a development associate, and a development consultant who's been brought on to help us get ready for the capital campaign. So it was us coming together. And I think the diversity of the team and the diversity of thought is something that I think is really important. You don't really need a lot of the people thinking in the same way. You need to have that diversity of thought and reach alignment. So we were able to do that as a team because people saw it from different kind of perspectives and angles. And then we said, okay, are there some parallel things happening here? What do we see kind of rise up? So that was, I think we could, as the universe would have it, that Tuesday was the governor's address and we were doing our meeting. The Thursday would have been the first fundraiser. That Saturday, we had a board meeting already planned. So, it was a matter of, so those finances that you're looking at that were already a month outdated, we probably don't want to spend our time thinking about 2 months ago. Let's talk about what we know about this current moment and our finances. And then that Sunday was the 15th, so our books would have closed. And so I really was able to talk about my work the following week to be able to deliver to the board the most recent finances that we have. So they knew about, and that's where the board went and like, oh my God, what is our finances? So being able to supplement that with preliminary thinking about messaging and what we were able to do kind of helped, but the board didn't, they supported it because what they wanted to know about the finances was really, there was a way to get that communication.
Yeah, and that's a really great segue into another question that we have a little bit further up, which is, Cathi, you can feel free to speak to this as well. What was the turnaround for most orgs to change this course of action? And we know it's like a multi-tier level of turnarounds, but like if you could summarize it, even if you feel like you're getting out of it now.
All right, so I think because it was, all of the media we had created for Beyond the Stage was not relevant. So, so I would say for us, we turned it around that afternoon. Like we immediately went to response mode because we were meeting. And what that meant is, you know, let's plan, what is our messaging going to be? You know, what can we do well? So that's the thing that I think that we made a decision. We were not going to, again, another reason we couldn't go into the virtual fundraising space is because we don't have a history. Do we think we can do it well? Do we have the capacity? We knew we could do the appeal well because we have years of doing appeal. We do one in the fall for the end of the year. And that one raised really, for both of our appeals, we set $25,000 as like both of them will do about 12. And the one at the end of the calendar year did 23 by itself. You know, so we knew we could do appeals well, or felt strongly. So we built it around that, which meant what is the graphics, what is the messaging, is the peer-to-peer page working? So we were able to go into that kind of mode. And so again, it's a mixture of graphic designers, people checking the tech, and things like that. So it felt like we needed 2 weeks to be able to do a responsive job and not a reactionary one. We were able during that time to communicate our kind of proclamation in the moment. So the first thing people heard from us was about that history, was about queer and trans people of color cultural strategies that have always been linked to survival and community in this time. So we really started with just a proclamation. And then, so I would say about 2 weeks because of then the portfolio work and things like that. Yes.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Right now, I'm going to point people to the chat. There's a lot of great conversation happening there about Zoom breakout rooms for larger online events, and who's done it and who's not. But so look to the chat for that. But other than that, we're going to move on to Roxie just to keep an eye on time.
Hi, everyone. I'm so honored to be here. And Harold, I'm really excited to be on a panel with you. I learned from you just about this time last year the word cultural organizer. And that felt like a gift that went right to my heart and my soul. And I was like, this is the identity that we all need to be working under now. So I really thank you for that and for sharing your experience, and Cathi too. So I'm from Puppet Showplace Theater. I'm the artistic director there. We're a small staff, which is why I'm also the artistic director talking about fundraising. To set the scene a little bit, Puppet Showplace is a 45-year-old presenting theater with 3 full-time staff, 6 part-time staff, 2 independent contractor resident artists, but we also do business with about 30 different puppet companies, independent puppet companies every year, who really represent this extraordinary part of the intangible cultural heritage of New England. And so when when closure started to happen and we saw that this community, this artistic practice was at risk, not only through our organization, which serves as a home for that community as a presenting theater, but also with ripple effects. These were artists who perform in schools, who perform in people's homes, and whose work for at least 3 months, we were estimating, if not much longer, has all just completely evaporated. So for us at the theater, earned income, ticket-based income, birthday party rentals, et cetera, is about 65 to 75% of our annual budget. So stopping ticket sales for the time that also included April vacation was particularly scary for us. And then usually we have a June fundraiser. The theater was founded on June 2nd, 1974. So we usually celebrate the theater's birthday with some kind of event-based fundraiser that also includes a mail and email campaign. So that fundraiser for this spring had like a $30,000 revenue target. And one thing that was really fortunate for us is this has been a year where our board and staff have been very intentional about fundraising strategy as it relates to the future goals of the theater. We had just gone through a major visioning exercise that outlined some priorities, and we're going to go into strategic planning from that. We also had looked at our spring fundraiser, and the staff really had said, you know, doing an event-based fundraiser, we're a group that does 300 performance events a year. So having yet another event to raise money was, this year just didn't feel like something we were excited about. So we had already kind of laid the groundwork to have a spring campaign that was primarily based in stewardship, direct solicitation, and then trying to like encourage participation, right? Just cultivation from, we have a membership program, so members looking at how really connecting with them directly to become donors, etc. So here's what we did instead. Oh, I guess one thing I also wanted to say, I've been at Puppet Showplace for 10 years. We have a new managing director who had not yet been through a spring campaign. So he had started in last August. And then we also had a brand new development coordinator for the very first time. We had hired this staff position, and she had started in January. So we also have a staff who's really been thrown into the fire, but is performing very bravely. So our board met on March 12th, where we discussed all of the projected impacts, both on our organization and on, like I said, all of the artists in our sector. And while we didn't feel that we had the capacity to run a full-on relief program, we also knew that we just didn't want to do fundraising unless it was also going to directly support puppeteers. So we made commitments to pay partial fees to everyone who had contracts with closed shows at our theater. And we also made commitments to continue to stipend our hourly box office staff. And then our two resident artists, again, their income is based entirely on the gigs that we arrange for them. We did make a more substantial financial commitment to pay them monthly stipends. So given all of those and our initial closure projections, we set an emergency fundraising goal. So this is like a new campaign of $50,000 called the Take Action Emergency Fund. The sort of overarching idea behind that was the concept of support the people behind the puppets. And our ask was to support puppeteers and vulnerable arts workers during closure. In addition, I would say we were also really inspired by the early StageSource convenings and the concept of I guess kind of health metaphor as it relates to our sector, which is creative response and future recovery. That was also something that we wanted to invite our donors, patrons, audience to invest in. So that campaign has been carried out through our email distribution, which our list is about 16,000, and other direct solicitations. As of today, we're 90% to that goal, and we've had about 180 gifts from people, so we're really honored. People have left like extraordinarily touching messages. We love you. We hope, you know, we can't wait to see you again. So that has been an amazing dose of joy in this very difficult time. We hope that the different government relief programs will also allow us to access, for us, it's about another $46,000 of support, so that we can continue to essentially make good on the commitment that we've made to those initial donors. But I think government support will be a really crucial part of this for us. I will say that one thing that informed our strategy, because I know there's a lot of folks from different kind of structures and sizes of theaters here. Many of our ticket buying audience and the people on our email list are professionals who have stable income. It includes a lot of teachers, professors. It includes a lot of like lawyers and tech sector people and medical professionals. So we didn't feel a moral hazard in asking people for money. We know that puppeteers need help from people with stable income. And so we really spent a lot of time with messaging, making sure that we weren't, you know, elbowing out emergency aid programs for people who are impoverished. We felt comfortable that we were working in alliance with what people could afford. That said, we serve a much broader audience of many people who are significantly at risk. We do tons of work with Boston Public Schools. We give free and subsidized tickets to over 10,000 kids every year. So we also knew that we wanted to make a commitment that any content that we were generating or putting out during this time would be made available for free, so that people could really feel that what they were investing in and the sort of minimized operations we were undergoing at this time was helping to support as broad a community as possible. We also know, as I mentioned, that advocacy is just a really crucial part of this. So in our Take Action Emergency Fund page on our website, we also list, you know, just a whole lot of other actions that we encourage people to do and want to support. That includes filling out your census, that includes being part of Mass Creative's email list. We really see it as essential and valuable to us, and a legitimate investment of people's time to be advocating on behalf of the creative sector. I did want to mention really quickly, because Dawn had asked about fundraising platforms. So we have been doing things through our ticketing system. We're on Audience Views Ovation Ticks. We are actually in the process of migrating off of that system. We've seen a really significant drop in quality of service and an increase in fees since they were recently acquired. And so we were one of the things we've done during this time is more of the work to migrate to Blackbaud's Altru system, which we're not on yet. And at first, because also our ticketing system, all of their people were working remotely, and they put another system in place because they were getting a lot of chargebacks with canceled events. We were, they're holding on to, I think, 25% of event-based revenue to reconcile for like 90 days. We were absolutely terrified at first that meant 25% of donations. We clarified that that is not the case, so thank God, deep sigh of relief. But it has been, it is not a like joke about the processing fees and operations of donations when you're doing things remotely. I will say, just if anyone wants to follow up either here or later with me through the kind of national, international puppetry community, there's a lot of people who have done great experimentation with a lot of different things. There's a big push for people to hold virtual puppet slams, and a lot of those have brought in a sizable amount of donations that might be on par with what the ticket sales would have been for those events. Some puppeteers have done things through Patreon. They have done live streams through Facebook with PayPal and Venmo, and many are offering online stores. So if anyone is interested in that, I'm happy to put you in touch with puppeteers who may have tried some things out. And then looking forward, we got the Jim Henson Foundation has been an amazing leader in this, and they have made to puppet theaters in the country a $5,000 kind of matching challenge grant available. So we're going to be thinking about, for the people who are really puppetry focused and excited to support the sector, who we might reach out to about that. We are starting to do more free digital gathering events. We have one next Tuesday. It's our event, The Hatchery, which is a free drop-in event for people with works in progress. So we're going to host one of those next Tuesday, and we'll probably host a virtual puppet slam as well. And then this campaign, I think, will just be ongoing while we're closed. Like we'll try to message. You know, I'm spending a lot of time reading the news, right? Because there's a lot to process about what our prospects are, what our needs are, and what's available to us. I think we're really looking into other partnerships with organizations who we might be able to like help signal boost for them in our fundraising as well. And I would say, just last thing, one thing that has been a struggle for me, I keep being like, I'm gonna write this blog post and it will be really meaningful and then it can be useful in our messaging. But you know, it's my 10-year anniversary at the theater, and it is hard for me to find the words that express what needs to be expressed in the current moment. I'll say yesterday we found out that Paul Vincent Davis, who has been with the theater since 1976, he's our resident Geppetto. He's in a nursing facility and he tested positive for coronavirus. He says he's doing okay. I spent a lot of time yesterday in like total grief and despair. I was able to talk to him, and he, you know, he's like, oh, my training with theatrical breathing is making me strong in this moment. But it was a very dark time yesterday, thinking about some of those prospects that we're facing. So we're taking it one day at a time, and yeah, we will be back.
Roxie, thank you so much. And our thoughts are with you. So, right, it's bittersweet, but happy 10, but we feel for you in this moment. Friends, there are tons of really great questions in the chat, but I want to make sure that we get to Amy at Gamm to talk a little bit about how things are going in Rhode Island and how they're positioning. So I'm going to turn it over to Amy, and then we'll roll it back to T with questions in the chat. Thanks, friends.
Hi everyone, Amy Gravell. I'm the managing director at the Gamm Theater in Warwick, Rhode Island. And I will say, I said to Dawn when we had this chat, I feel a little bit like an imposter in that I am brand new to the organization. I started in November, and I spent my entire career in social services in the last 14 running a local Boys and Girls Club. So arts and culture and being in a professional theater is brand new for me. And I am really just overwhelmed, I think, by the openness and the sense of community and collaboration that I felt from everyone. So, you know, I'll surely be reaching out to all of you too, and I'm happy to share whatever I can that will be of help to you. But I hope to be at your theaters in the near future so that I can meet you in person. So, so just to give you a little sense of the context of where we were in the midst of, we had started a run of Assassins. We were about a week and a half in to the production when we had to shut down. March 12th, I think, was our last performance. And in the midst of all of this, you know, sort of unknowingly, we had this magical opportunity of online fundraising that we didn't really put a whole lot of stock in, quite frankly. And what that was is I had served on, or was serving on, the advisory committee for an online giving day called 401 Gives. So 401 happens to be the only area code in Rhode Island, which is where the name came from, and it was planned for April 1st. When I was asked to be on the advisory committee, I, you know, willingly agreed. I had a lot of colleagues in the fundraising world who were participating, and it was being coordinated by the United Way of Rhode Island. So a little bit more power and prestige and organization behind it than some other giving days that had happened previously in Rhode Island. Now, I'll say I came to it with a little bit of a sense of hesitancy, and wasn't really sure what was going to happen because we hadn't had great success in my career anyway, not so much at the Gamm, but in general with online giving days like Giving Tuesday. And so there was definitely a sense of, oh, do we really want to do this, and how much effort do we want to put into it? So what I can say is that, you know, I don't know for sure, but my sense is that because of the time that we're living in and what had happened, you know, in the 2 weeks previous to April 1st, that this Giving Day became this amazing success. And there was just this groundswell of support around Rhode Island for organizations. At the outset, the goal of the United Way was to raise $1 million statewide from 300 or through 300 organizations. And all the money was going to go directly to the organizations. They organized it through an online giving platform called GiveGab. And so all of our donor information was protected, and they were just able to aggregate information so that they could collectively see what was happening on that day. They mobilized the support of local corporations and businesses and had prize money available for, you know, organizations that were automatically entered as soon as you raised a certain amount of money or had so many donors available. And there was the opportunity for people to set up their own online fundraisers connected with your page. So, you know, leading up to the day, again, as a team, even 2 weeks out when all of this was happening, it felt a bit more of a chore than anything. And we, you know, said we want to have a presence. It's really important, especially because I was serving on the advisory committee. We need to be present. We have to take every opportunity in this moment to get ourselves in front of donors, to tell our story and potentially bring new people to the organization. So, you know, we, you know, spent time making sure that we were setting up a page that we were proud of, that we were sending out emails that were planned to, you know, our constituency, and that we were rallying the board and staff and other folks that were closely connected to the theater to have them be able to help it go viral on the day of. What I can tell you is, and you can check out the page because I think it's really inspiring to see what ended up happening. It's just 401gives.org. But, and then you can search for the Gamm Theater and other theaters, you know, and organizations around the state. But what I'm really happy to report is that across the state, we raised $1.3 million on that day from over 400 organizations, or through 400 organizations. But what was really surprising to us was that the Gamm ended up raising $22,000, and we were number 8 in the state out of all organizations. So it was, you know, when I tell you there was such a high that day, and I think, you know, certainly for us because we didn't expect it, and there was this real grassroots feeling of support because we had staff members and their families and actors and, you know, our crew all helping to raise money and bring people to the organization. And so we had 150 different donors, and gifts ranged from $10 all the way up to $5,000. That was an outlier. The big gift was not typical of what we were seeing on that day. But, you know, I think it really spoke to the fact that people were really wanting to be a part of something bigger than themselves and be able to help in some way. And so for us to see what was happening around the state and how organizations were being supported and not just us felt really inspiring. And I think a testament to what I've been hearing other folks saying is that, you know, people really want to be able to do good and to help in this time. And just because we weren't the food bank didn't mean that people weren't going to want to support us, because we were really important to a certain community of people. So I think the lesson that we learned from that was to really be fearless and don't stop and keep moving forward in your fundraising. Because although this was a day that was set up ahead of time and it was just this gift that we couldn't have imagined it being, it taught us a lot of lessons. And I think, you know, really showed that there was an opportunity there that we weren't necessarily capitalizing on beforehand, or a way to reach donors in a different way. Now that being said, I'll say we are not experts in online fundraising. We certainly, you can give through our website. And now that we're in the midst of what we're in the midst of, we've been doing a weekly Brush Up Your Shakespeare with our artistic director, Tony Estrella, and we've connected a Venmo account to that so that when people are watching, they can give through Venmo. We're thinking about, you know, who's our audience and what are the different ways that people are going to give. Admittedly, we have a really an older constituency that typically doesn't give online, so we've not developed a real strong foundation in this, and this is new for us. But we've been just making sure that in all the messaging that we're doing, whether it's on social media or you know, emails that are really directed and personalized to donors, or emails that are going out that are just this, you know, a new weekly newsletter that we've developed over email to keep people posted about what's happening, and that we're including a giving link in everything that we do. So there's a soft ask in everything and not always a direct ask, but just making ourselves present and available to people. I will say we did have a gala planned for March 30th. And then we moved the date to June 29th, thinking surely that would be an absolutely perfect time to do it and there wouldn't be any issues with it. We have almost 100% decided that we will be canceling the gala, and we are not going to move it to the fall or to a virtual event. Not because there hasn't been success with it. We've seen some of our colleagues in Rhode Island doing virtual things and being really successful. But for us, it was really a matter of capacity and also knowing our donors. And with the group that we have, it just didn't feel to be really the right way for us to proceed. And so instead, we are working with all of our sponsors and donors to convert their gifts and use them in a different way, not through the event, and rather to, sort of repurpose them to support what's happening now, but recognize them in our new fiscal year coming up, either through shows or through a special dinner that we'll have when we're able to, really having personal conversations. So, I'd say, I think with everything that we've been doing, we've been trying really hard to have personal conversations. We're calling a lot of our donors, and not necessarily to ask for money, but to just have a conversation and check in and see how they're doing, particularly because many of them do live alone and they're older. And then we've been sending a lot of handwritten notes in the mail to people and just really trying to connect on a personal level, because at the core of, what all of us do, it's getting people in a room together and breathing the same air that makes what we do really special, and it's exactly what we can't be doing. And so we don't, want to pretend to be something different, but at the same time, we really want to be present and being as responsive as we can in this time, even though it's not the core of what we'll be doing, hopefully, going forward. I will say, sort of a side gig of mine, or a volunteer gig, is my involvement with the Association of Fundraising Professionals, and I'm the president of the Rhode Island chapter. And so I would say for anyone on this call, and please spread the word, there are chapters all over the world of AFP. And for most things, there's benefits for membership, or a discount if you're a member. But there's a lot of things that chapters are doing right now to reach out to people and even have peer support calls that don't cost anything and are open to everyone. So I would invite all of you to join us in Rhode Island. We do a call every Friday, and we rotate the call from 8:30 in the morning to noon to 4. And you can find us on our website, which is afpri.org, or on Facebook, which is Facebook/AFPRI, to find out when the events are and get the links for the Zoom calls. Those have been really great because you get people across all sectors and just people tossing out questions and being able to really talk about, some of the challenges that they're having and idea share. So I would say join us in Rhode Island virtually, or find your local Massachusetts chapter, because there's likely some really good resources that would be helpful. I think there's probably a lot more that I wanted to say, but I'm aware of the fact that there's probably a lot of questions, so I'll turn it back to Don.
Groovy. So questions. I'm gonna turn it back to T. Hi.
Great. So we have some questions for the overall team. I would say the first question from Karthik is, how are people accounting for changes in contributed income for the next season? Are you budgeting it to be the same or less? And I'll say, anyone can talk who've been on our panel.
This is Roxie. We're not into next year budgeting quite yet. I think, again, given who our population of donors is, our expectations for that, what is a smaller part of our budget is that we would probably be able to maintain numbers. Our board members are still employed, and that's a huge part of our giving. For us, it's really just the projections with ticket sales, which is who knows at this point. Our fiscal year starts in the summer, so we're definitely still anticipating lost revenue at that time.
I was just going to say that next season is our 30th anniversary. And we had big plans for that in terms of fundraising and events and whatnot. So I was, with the momentum that we had through the winter and approaching the gala, I was planning an increase in our budget, because I've already been asked to budget for next year. But I am actually currently exploring taking that back. I've got a goal of giving some revised numbers to our finance committee by the end of April. But one of the things that I've been encouraged by that I wanted to mention, I don't know if other folks have seen this, but we had to cancel halfway through our production of The Children, and more than 50% of our ticket buyers donated their tickets back. which was really amazing. And so I think that we're finding some new donors. A lot of those people are not people who were currently donors. So I'm just thinking about different kinds of opportunities to fundraise in a different way, different ways to talk to people. So I'm hopeful. I know a lot of people are not, but I'm hopeful that we'll be able to keep making a case. I do think earned income is going to be a challenge. And I think at Speakeasy, we're doing a lot of scenario planning. So we've chosen to continue to be bold in our programming, and Paul will be announcing the season in a couple of weeks. And I think see it as not conservative, but Paul continuing to be bold. And I think that people want to get out there, and I think they want to support arts organizations when they can. I know that a lot of people are hurting, so I don't want to discount that, but I choose to be hopeful. And I think that some of the webinars I've joined, a lot of what people are advising in the development profession is to be bold, be brave, and talk about the future from a position of strength. So, really thinking about, like I saw this one theater, I forget where they were, but they created a campaign called the Roarin' Back Fund. And I think it was just their way of sort of naming, if you give now to this fund, I'm sure it's an operating support fund. I didn't speak to anyone about it, but it was mentioned in a webinar I was on. And people want to hear that you're coming back, and then they're going back to the theater. And so the way that they're going to give to that is through contributed income. So I think if we stay in touch with our donors, if our messaging shows that we're being sensitive to the situation at hand, but that we also have a really good story to tell, I think people are going to be there. I don't know, we might talk again in 6 months and you'll say, Cathi, you were too optimistic, but I don't want to budget for 20% down. I'm not going to do that. I think I am looking at my corporate. I do think corporate's going to be a challenge. And so, we solicit $1,000 gifts, $2,500 gifts, and we give them advertising over the season. And I know that's going to be in flux. And a lot of these small businesses aren't going to be able to write me $1,000 check in June like they did last year. But I'm thinking about ways that I can, almost set up like a payment plan, a pledge plan, if they can pay by the show. I don't know. I'm thinking about that, but that's a small percentage of my budget. So I don't know. I think it's going to be okay if we keep telling our story and we tell it well.
Can I respond just really quickly? Some of our thinking is trying to figure out as much as we can this year about next year. And that includes, we are blessed to have multi-year support institutionally. And so hearing things like, okay, that doesn't change. What does it look like on the individual side? And so we're also reaching out to people to give them options or being engaged with them around how do you want to handle your multi-year pledge? And it gives an opportunity to know, either folks are saying, I may not be able to commit, come back. I want to do more now. Some folks whose pledges were expiring and we hadn't had an opportunity to talk about next year have already paid, So it's like, oh, okay. And how we budget that money is a different kind of question. And again, we don't have to make immediate decisions about this year. So in terms of special events, my goal this year is to reduce the amount of risk in the budget and allow this to be a year where we learn about donor behavior in a different way. So we are moving what we've already secured for Beyond the Stage to next year, some stuff to Marathon, so we can study donor behavior, because it really, we don't know how people are gonna react. And I think managing stress and risk in this moment seems key. So really starting with what have we secured and how can we secure more or have the information about more earlier, which is around communication. And then, okay, did we reach what we needed to reach? Because we still have aspirations of launching a capital campaign and building reserves, right? So that's the current thinking.
Cool. That kind of segues us into the next question of like, what kind of fundraising are you all doing now or planning for the future, right? Are you planning relief fundraising, operations, programmatic? What's on your calendars, or what's on your minds?
Yeah, I'll just say quickly again, since I was there, again, the capital campaign, which I know some of y'all are like, are you crazy? Yes, I am. Capital campaign, these recovery efforts is what we're doing relief right now, but we're looking at really recovery efforts. Just operations, you know, kind of the day-to-day, what will our programming look like next year? And then we're studying our history, right? So we're an organization that's old enough to remember this moment in 2008. Actually, from that moment, our budget doubled and our staff, everything doubled in the recovery effort. It's also the time where we decided to change our strategy to work directly in neighborhoods. We had a very compelling story for the last 10 years about how we were working. So we're studying who were the funders, what did they fund, right? So did, you know, arts education recover first and then programming? To kind of, but we also know it's the long game. It is not necessarily FY21 for us. It's 22, 23, 24, because as anyone, if you I put myself in this predicament. I don't have the best financial management strategies for myself. Hopefully they're better for the organization. But it's like I'm making calculated decisions around all of my income, especially my discretionary income. So I'm the first test of a donor. So even if a donor would have given at a different capacity, I anticipate them giving something. That's why I need this year to kind of study behavior.
This is Roxie. So on that question, I would say like our current campaign is this almost like it's an emergency fund. So it's fundraising the reserves that we wish we had to exist. But really our focus, aside from that, we've been really trying to deploy our staff to do the kinds of foundational work that we knew needed to be done anyway. And as a like year-round presenting organization, it's always been really hard for us just to, you know, do things like consistently produce an annual report or have really great media that we use to represent our programming to funders long term. One of the things we applied for and did not get an NEA grant last year for our New Works development program, but we got really great feedback from the person and a lot of from the program officer and a lot of encouragement, you know, so they were like, okay, well, here are the other things that you could create to make that case. So now we're like, well, if it's on us if we don't get that together in time for the next grant deadline to be, you know, to do our job and tell our story. So other things like that kind of set the stage for what we had hoped was a 5-year vision statement, and strategic development is kind of where we're trying to put our efforts. It's like, if we're closed now, how do we take all that administrative work we would have spread out over the next several years and been doing frantically? How do we try to do that in a focused way now?
I could just quickly jump in and say that, you know, usually we're gearing up for our end of year annual appeal now that we're at the end of the gala. And I think we'll probably still do similar work to what we've done before. But what I'm focusing on right now is where I think we need to see and will see the most growth is in major gifts, and really spending time doing analysis and looking for the untapped potential that I haven't ever had time to dig for. So that's the focus of my next couple of weeks, is really taking a deep dive into the wealth information that we have on our donors. Because usually I'm just moving fast. So I want to be geared up for when people start to come out, that I can reach out and take meetings and visit people. And I'm hopeful for that down the road. So I'm trying to do as much prep work as I can.
Awesome. Thanks. And then I'll say maybe we have time for one last question, Don, before we got to end it at 12:30, but you let me know. Another question from Deborah Cash is, how are people's boards talking about current year's deficits in comparison to organically approved budgets, knowing the entire sector may be running paper deficits?
So, I would say this as someone who answers to a board and is on a couple of different boards of national service organizations. Like I said, we were fortunate to have a board meeting already scheduled during that week. And the organization, again, because we knew we had, and I should just frame, we don't have like an endowment. It's a small reserve, but we felt like, okay, it gives us some planning time, right? And so what we did in that planning time was, again, I worked really hard to get the latest finances to the board. Our finance committee, you know, is almost meeting through email and stuff, kind of like weekly, to report out to the larger board. And then when some of the loan opportunities came, it kind of shifted our conversation. And the conversation was about, you know, we've done reprojections twice, and I think that's just how our process. So they already had a round of reprojections, so we were going to do it anyway for the next finance committee meeting. But after, we're not reprojecting anymore. It's like reproject based off of what 24 hours, you know. So that's been really supportive, not to have to do another round, but also let us know our cash situation. If we were to take a loan, we're in a process of thinking, how much debt do we want to take on? And even still, as hard as it is, and this is why I preference it by saying I answer to a board and I'm on board, having an ED or someone think about debt reduction seems like, you know, the worst thing you can do, but it's really, really necessary because, you know, you are engaging and taking on more debt, and the government thing looks okay, but there also could be this predatory lending that's, you know, because playing on our emotions and things like that. So even engaging with debt reduction plans for our own organization, if we take advantage of loans, and then as a board member, just trying to work with the appropriate staff and committees to say, this is critical. If we're going to borrow from a line of credit, if we're going to say, like, we have to have some initial thinking and at least know what the terms are, because some of it in the line of credit, you can have terms that you have to pay it all the way down within a 12-month period. And what we haven't heard from our bank and our line of credit is that we're renegotiating the term.
Amy here from the Gamm again. I would just say, in regards to fundraising or planning with budgets and stuff, I would suggest that you know, having conversations with funders or you know, as Harold mentioned, with banks, be really open to and bold about your conversations, because people are surprising. And so our, you know, conversations with some of our funders that typically don't do anything except program or capital support is that they're being very responsive and turning their funding over to operations because they understand what a different time this is. And so from people that we would have never expected the kind of operational support that we're now receiving, you know, it's worth the conversation. So, you know, be brave when you're having those conversations and ask, and hopefully they're communicating anyway with you, but we've had great success with that. And I will say we are closing this week on the Paycheck Protection Program. So, you know, if anyone has questions about that process, I'm more than happy to chat even offline about it.
All right, folks, this is the first time we have gone to time. I don't know if I am proud, pleased, or like this is just a vital conversation. So thank you to all of our speakers today. This was incredibly helpful to StageSource as we are in the middle of this ourselves right now. So thank you for all of your good ideas, all this great conversation. We'll try to get this conversation out into the world next week, but we are also trying to make sure that it's accessible, so doing captioning, so please be patient with us. We'll have other things online as they come through. And just a reminder, next week, we're gonna talk about board engagement and how you are keeping your boards abreast of things, how they are helping to make decisions. A lot of this fundraising stuff comes back to that, and we'll be talking about that next week on Tuesday. So until soon, friends, put on a mask. Ciao.